Okay, I'll bring some. Do we have some? مرحبا السيدات والسادة الحضور.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last session, last panel of this year's debate. I think this last session, after 2 days of brainstorming and discussing, everyone is exhausted, and this topic isn't easy. And also, after a great lunch, it will be difficult. However, I believe that this is going to be an enriching discussion, albeit with some difficult and honest questions, and we're expecting transparent answers, as honest as possible. I would like first to begin by welcoming my guests, Mr. Yaser Abdrabbou, former Secretary of the Palestinian Liberation Organization's Executive Committee. And also, let me welcome Dr. Dalal Iriqat, Associate Professor of Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution at the Arab American University in Palestine. In the beginning, two guests were optimistic that this panel discussion will be quick. And they told me my mission is very easy. I will just ask a question about the hope for setting up a Palestinian state, and the answers will be short and quick. But I told them this is not going to be the case. There will be a lot of discussions and important insights. Let's begin with you, Mr. Yaser Abdrabbou. After October 7th, some people believe that the dream for a Palestinian state evaporated. However, others can say that things can be built upon what happened, especially that Ireland and Spain and other countries recognize the Palestinian state, and there are 143 countries that voted pro a Palestinian state in the General Assembly of the United Nations. Also, Saudi Arabia is leading a coalition supporting the establishment of a Palestinian state. Are we closer or farther from the Palestinian state? It's not about being far or close to this. It's about the necessity to see or look into the historical factors that led to what we are seeing today. We also have to see that in reality, there are 7 million Palestinians living on the historical Palestinian land. It's a whole people, and this Palestinian people is scattered between the West Bank and Gaza and the Israeli territories. And these people, in many generations, I belong to the third generation, there is also the fourth and fifth generation. They have one ambition, which is freedom. Freedom is their only ambition, and we have reached in the Oslo Agreement to what was deemed then as a historical deal that was protested and rejected by many parties who were not optimistic towards the deal. However, we were determined to go through with this experience, which is not in line with the conflict that has been going on for decades. We accepted to share the historical Palestinian land into two states, a Palestinian state and an Israeli state. Today, I will be moving to today, and Smotrich is talking about instructions being issued to start preparing the infrastructure to annex the West Bank. They're using the word annexing Asamira and Yahuda, and sometimes they want to sugarcoat the terminology when they talk about the settlements in the West Bank and even Zone C and part of Zone B. This means automatically that 70% of the West Bank lands and the rest will just be an isolated or some scattered and isolated cities that are surrounded by Israel from every side. And this is what they believe is the key result and the main success that they can get from the October 7th events and before that. And the funny side about this strategy, yesterday Benjamin Netanyahu sent his national advisor to Washington with with a shopping list, so to speak, in order to show it to the President-elect Trump, in order to select among a group of topics what he believes that Israel should be doing now, or topics and steps that should be delayed in order to win or to be done after Trump is in the White House. This leads us to ask, what world are we living in? Mr. Yasser, we are certain, as you mentioned, Smotrich and Israel has succeeding and changing governments, and not everything that's planned is being implemented. But as you said, the current implications could happen. They had some plans in Sinai and Gaza that they could not execute, but not everything that Israelis want to do can actually implement in reality, either because of changing governments or changing conditions or otherwise. Can you give me a quick comment on the Palestinian side? Do they have any cards that they can use based on what I mentioned, the recognition of three European countries, the efforts by the UN and the Arab countries? There are things that we don't want to keep repeating. True that the reality on the ground has changed, especially in Gaza, and true that under this government, the settlement activity has expanded in an unprecedented manner, and they are dreaming of the annexation and isolating Palestinians in small cities. However, the Palestinian people has resisted all this, and today the world isn't accepting this anymore. And there is a lot of division in the public opinion internationally and in countries that we never thought that we will be influencing, including inside the United States and among the youth in the United States. And there is also a large portion of the Jews in the U.S. There is a change that's happening, and colleagues that talked before me have spoken about changes on the Arab scale. Maybe this is there are some kinds of blame or criticism of the Arab situation, but in my opinion, the Arab world right now is completely aware that this is the time to reap the fruits of peace that will be utilized by the whole region, or we lose the opportunity forever.
في هذا
We'll take the first step in this direction. Dr. Dalal, do you think that it is possible to utilize or you take advantage of this international situation to build on something that prevent maybe the expansion and accession plans that Mr. Yasser talked about, and build on the idea of having a Palestinian state? Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Emirates Policy Center for that, and for inviting me for this event with this model that's made by Dr. Ibtisam as a leading woman and leading for young people. This is a role model for the Arab world as a whole. We are, as the Palestinian people, we are always there. We are standing on our feet in this area. Maybe a different generation, and say that we are resilient. We will stay there. There is a difference between the rights and the humanitarian aid. When we talk about our right for self-determination and faith determination, we're talking about the new, when you're talking about Palestinian state, I'm as a professor, as an academic figure, I would like to just to say that this is built on policy, not an idea. So Dr. Gergash was talking about the pragmatic attitude and the national state, but the national state is built on sovereignty. As Palestinians, it's not for us, and this is a message for all the politicians. It's not about saying that the right of the Palestinian state, but it's about the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state, and this will never happen unless we have a package. The first point, or the kick-off point, will be the termination of the occupation, the military occupation, and then second point is to set the borders for Israel. When we talk about the solution of two-state or two-state solution, we know that the Israeli state is available there for 76 years. We are, as Arab nations, we need to work together. We will need to enhance dialogue, the Arabian dialogue among us, in order to use the voices for the young people, for women, the modern and contemporary tools that will enable to achieve the dream of the Palestinian people. It's not just a dream, but it's something that can be translated into reality. I live under occupation. I live in Ramallah, in the West Bank, and we always, when we talk about the war on Gaza, as a part of the academia, I can say that this is a genocide crime. And as the doctor said, my colleague from Saudi said, that it's a colonial project that has been there for 7 decades or more. That's why terminology is very important. It's not us who came with the genocide and apartheid or frequent detention. When we talk about now about more than 11,000 captives taken in captivity in Israel, and more than, when talking about the West Bank, and 750 martyrs over there. We're not talking about a war in Gaza only. We're talking a war that touches on all the Palestinian people. Every Palestinian is targeted by the war machine, the Israeli war machine. We're not just suffering from racism, apartheid, or Israeli occupation, but we are talking also about terrorism of the settlers who will get their protection and backed up by the Israeli army. I know that we are here. I know that when we talk about the current situation, everyone can see in the news what we're talking here, trying to get ideas or generate ideas on how to achieve what we want to be done. It's Mr. Yaser, what the Palestinian Authority can do before we go to the version. We're talking about the 3 countries now. What is the step that the Palestinian Authority should take in order to support these? There are a group of actions I can see at the international level, and I see also at the Arab countries level. I don't want to classify or categorize any of them now. When I say that there is engagement from the Arab states in these efforts, and wide international participation from Latin America to Europe to the African countries. So there are efforts exerted in order to reach a ceasefire and put an end to this barbaric war crimes, this invasion that wants to displace whole communities in Gaza in the current days. I'm not talking about the past. Well, there must be an end for this. We need to reach ceasefire, and we need to have arrangements that will ensure for the Palestinians and guarantee that they will have a real promise and of a settlement, of a real settlement. Now, all what concerns the Israeli government is to put obstacles and hindrances in front of any possibilities in the new American administration to have a political project or political program for a solution after the destructive war that we have witnessed. That's why the danger, there is a current danger and realistic danger, and we should not underestimate this danger, and don't just attribute this to Smotrich or someone else. So we say that all are two sides, or all are the sides of one kind. So here the Palestinian Authority, as if it were helping in doing this by ignoring the international advice. There are lots of voices talking about the reform from inside the Palestinian Authority. There must about the agreement between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Before we say to the world and before we face the world and say you have to do this and you have to do that, we start by ourselves. I am from the school that will say now, but maybe in a kind of euphemism because of the bloodshed that we are witnessing. But what I proposed is the same topic for today, and it was for yesterday, in the past, and for years. I will not talk about the experiment of the Palestinian Authority, but I know that what happened, this is one of the examples that we have seen in the Arab world about the outcome of having only one party, authoritarian rule, without adding any illustration, without telling just about similarities. We say this is what I wanted to say. I don't want now to throw the blames on this, on that, but I say both parties, Fatah and Hamas, are accountable and responsible. Which party is more than the other? Can be defined later, but both parties are responsible and should be held accountable for what we have at the moment. And now it is out of control after the 7th of October, and it gave the opportunity to Israel to implement and to revive its plans of displacement and coercive displacement. Let me say, how many agreements did Hamas and Fatah sign in Cairo, in Saudi Arabia, in Algeria, in China? Tens of agreements. And me and other people were calling for having a statement or having a draft for a statement that will end up with a national competent government that will break the rule of mono or authoritarian rule or monoparty rule. So in order to have the legitimate institution and regulatory institutions to have their efficient role, So both parties are responsible for making this. Or I just forgot. It's not only Cairo and Saudi Arabia. Yeah, we know there was one in Mecca. The history say that the country with one party, sometimes even if they have two parties, the results will not be that good. We usually say that the more parties, the better results you can find. I'm talking about free political actions. There can be up to 100 parties, and the vote will be the determinant. So you live in Ramallah. Why, in your point of view, the PLO is not responsible or not able to accommodate and contain Hamas? Because Hamas, as you said, they said in some statements, they agree to have a state on the borders of 67. Maybe why there is always discrepancies about this, no agreement about the border. I know as Palestinian that we are to blame as Palestinians, and due to the prices, the high prices that we paid as Palestinians, we need to admit our internal errors and mistakes, our own mistakes. Aside from the military occupation and the moral values and moral responsibility, I'm as a Palestinian person. I'll say that there is no cause or there is no justification for the lives that have been lost in Gaza or West Bank. So it's a moral imperative and religious imperative. And when we talk about the borders now, no, I'm not here to talk about or defend Hamas or to represent Hamas. But they amended their charter. They agreed to the 67 borders. It's not the Palestinian, it's not the Arab countries, it's not the U.S. The rejection of the Palestinian state is frequently done by the Israeli government. I would say that the conflict between Hamas and Fatah is due to Oslo agreement. No, this has been ended, and they participated in the election later, and they amended the charter. We don't want to delve into this, but I'm talking from pragmatic point of view, what we need in order to go forward. So since yesterday we're talking about the young people, we're talking about Dr. Ibtsam, we've been listening to Dr. Ziyudi. We need pragmatic ideology. We cannot have a pragmatic ideology without being impacted by the situation in the moment. I chose to live in Palestine, so I'm optimistic. I have no other choices. I need to be prepared. Trump is back to the image. Everybody thinks that Trump is unpredictable, but for us, it's a scenario. We tried him before. He put us in front of fact. He just gave Jerusalem as a prison to the Palestinians. No, so they didn't even open for the PLO representation office. So if we want to build on Balfour Promise in 1917, Article 2, dealing with non-Jewish as minorities, despite the fact that the Arabs, whether Muslims or Christians, they were majorities. They're talking about the rights of these minorities. Today, when we're talking about the British occupation, and then this is a translation of this topic. They transferred us as Palestinian into minorities, talking about partial rights. But we, as Palestinians, want our political rights. We want our social rights. We want economic rights. I want a team from Palestinian. I want the UAE and the UAE leadership. We deal with the UAE. They have experience and they have relationships and ties that we can build on this. We want to benefit on that. Before I go back to Mr. Yaser, I say the Palestinian people who resisted occupation, who had two intifada, how many times demonstrated against the Palestinian Authority, requesting or calling for a reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas. I say, all Palestinian. I said, how many times? Tell me number of demonstration. The people who forced the occupation to go to Oslo and signed this agreement. Why didn't they force the Palestinian Authority to do so? When we say that end of division and the reconciliation, it's not only Palestinian issue. We say there are lots of players and actors. What we want to say about the deal of century in Trump administration, first Trump administration, we're looking now for season 2 with more integration of more players. And I hope that the coalition with launched by Saudi Arabia with other countries to achieve this. I want Gaza to be San Jose and the Middle East. We are still in Gaza Strip, and we realized the reality, but we don't want to just keep blaming each other. Let's look forward. Let's look for the future. I want to be pragmatic and change the reality while I'm living, not when I leave this life. It's not a blame game, but I say we always need to confront ourselves before we blame the other. We need to tell the real story. There are some problems that we used to hide. We used to keep our heads in the sand. Well, when we want to say that we want to discuss this, we say not today, that's not the right time. Now when we ask on TV, representatives of Fatah, of PLO, why don't you allow Hamas to come in? They said, we have problems with this and that. And there is always disagreement about these topics. This is the main point. What is this disagreement? All the assumptions of each party against the other are not true. Let me tell you, there is nothing related to the political disagreement. Hamas has its program, they can go with that. I don't want all the parties, or the Israeli parties that will be part of the government or the cabinet to agree on Oslo agreement. We say none of the parties in the government at the moment agrees to Oslo agreement, or they agree to admit that there is other people, another nation lives here on that land. So all these assumptions are just try to justify the conflict for authority. Say this Palestinian Authority has no independence, no sovereignty, but still there is a conflict to reach that. The conflict for authority, the conflict for power. This conflict can happen through voting, through elections, parties. But the last time we had elections, it was, I think, 21. After that, after both parties agreed and all the parties were ready, we were astonished that the elections were postponed on the ground that Jerusalem doesn't want Israel doesn't want Jerusalem to participate in the elections. Israel never allowed us in any previous elections for Jerusalem to participate. But we found means to do this by airmail, by election stations at the borders of Jerusalem. We made this in 1996 and 2005 or 2006. This were all justifications, weak justifications for to keep the status quo. So if you ask me about the needs of people in the street, there are no demonstrations, no civil society powers, no political activity for the people to press. All the national teams or parties were pressing in order to get this reconciliation or agreement. And this is what was presented during the aggression on Gaza. And even the committee ISNAD in Cairo, it's a part of this. So this topic had many parts had interest in this topic, but it was not enough. At the Arabic level, to have a government of national competencies, individual, an autocrat government without the quota style. So the quota style or the quota will be by the people through the vote. This point is the key, is the real key in order to reach the way out. Without this, we're going to lose the opportunity. If you tell me now, despite the bloodshed, despite destruction, but the world is pressing at different levels in order to seize these opportunities to push the political process. If the Palestinian party is not qualified in a way that will lead to get up from this conflict marine or conflict area and competition for power, to leave this battle for power. We have this conflict in order to form a temporary committee to run Gaza Strip, to oversee the catastrophe and mitigate the impact. This is something ridiculous. There are calls, or there are hands from representing the Arab countries and international countries. Maybe short hands, and in the middle there is an Israeli sword. But the Palestinian head should stretch, or the Palestinian arm should stretch and reach out to these hands. Let's say for this conflict, let me say, do you think that this conflict is fueled by regional or international powers? Some countries will support Hamas in order to, because they say the Palestinian Authority are corrupt, and that's why they support Hamas in order to take over the power. And to the degree that we are here now, when we talk about the negotiation, the Palestinian Authority is not there. 2014 was the direct negotiator is Hamas. Palestinian Authority is not there, is absent. So this is maybe the same of the policy of Netanyahu in order to enhance and promote diversion, promote disagreement. If that's the case, or you have different projects, of course there are different projects. As a researcher, we need to discuss about the last 20 years, what happened between strategy and the West Bank, the strategy of Netanyahu and Sharon earlier, because Sharon, when they withdrew from Gaza Strip, we maybe, as Palestinian, I confess that we failed to send the narrative or to post this narrative. So Sharon withdrew 6,000 to 9,000 settlers, but never left the control over Gaza Strip, either by air, sea, or land. Whenever I wanted to go to Gaza Strip, I had to take the permission or the permit from Israel, not from Hamas. You know, they always said that we always create a form of formaldehyde around Gaza. It's a kind of just isolation. So he said, I'm the one and only capable of killing the solution. So Netanyahu or Sharon enabled Hamas and empowered Hamas in Gaza Strip in order to maintain the diversion, in order to maintain the internal conflict between Hamas and Fatah. I say that we are in an urgent need for a Palestinian dialogue, and we are in urgent need to practice our right in order to choose who represent us. We need the young people, we need women, we need scholars. We don't need only two technocrats. When you see here from Iran, from Turkey, from they saying that we support Hamas because the Palestinian Authority is corrupt, do you think this can cause more? Of course, from our perspective, I say the Palestinian parties, of course, let the case, let the Palestinian case down instead of serving it. So, as from the diplomatic perspective, I'd say that also diplomacy let the Palestinians down. So now the Palestinians would like to build on the bilateral diplomacy. the bilateral agreement between the Arab states and Israel from academic point of view. I think all countries are free to have these bilateral agreements, and we as Palestinians, today I will tell you like something like a surprise. Yeah, only 5 countries they have representation, active representation in Palestine, and this is a call through this forum is for all the Arab countries to have representation in Palestine in order to open the channels for communication with Palestinian Authority. Let's move now to think about the shape of the Palestinian state that we want to have. Now you're talking about sovereignty. You want to say you have army, you have air permissions for the jet planes when they pass over this airspace. So from the realistic point of view, what we can do? Today, many people are talking about the one-state solution or 2 states against one state. As a researcher, I would say that any Palestinian citizen living under these conditions, from the Palestinian person perspective, it is now makes no difference for any Palestinian individual, as long as they have their own rights, as long as they don't, they have their sovereignty as a Palestinian, and as live the real politique. When we talk about the geopolitics only, I can say that the increase of settlements and in all areas where the Palestinians are there, whether in camps or villages or cities, makes it impossible to have 2-state solution with the current status quo, because the settlements, and not only from theoretical point of view, not even exchange of land and settlements. In 2000, there was advisory resolution talking about the legality of the occupation and the displacement of the settlement. Also, we won't talk about the right of the Palestinian people to determine their fate and self-determination. And when we talk about in the whole region, and we talk about stability, sustaining security and peace for Palestinians and Israeli and the whole region, we're talking about pioneership. We're talking about solutions. In order to achieve this and maintain this for the Israeli state, if Trump really frank when he talked about security and strategic stability and prosperity in the region, he must grant the rights to the Palestinians. And here we need to differentiate. We're not here negotiating the humanitarian needs. As Palestinians, they don't have internet, they don't have water, they don't have electricity. So there are rights. These are no. We are not negotiating this. We're talking about the final situation. We're talking about the final position. This is what the Trump didn't talk about, and we need to sit in a pragmatic way. Mr. Yaser, I need to ask you this question, and I will ask you again about the form of the Palestinian state that you can imagine. But a question I need you to be frank about, or some people will say about the analysis for the conflict and the disagreement between Hamas and Fatah. Some politicians see this is a chance and an opportunity because Hamas will not be there anymore, so you will get rid of political rival and will justify this, but that we are going to eliminate an obstacle against peace, and then so we can wait until this obstacle is eliminated and then we move forward towards peace. Honestly speaking, tell me, is that right? We have so many problems. We have so many diseases, if we can call it, about moral diseases. So, and this is one of this. And from the political point of view, when we are talking about a current or a conflict that's based on competition or competition for power between 2 parties, each party is trying to distort the image of the other party and magnify the mistakes of the other there are wishful thinking of them, or they wish that they get weakened because they think this will make them stronger. Of course, this is something we can say it's getting deeper, particularly in institutions of the institutions of power for both parties. You can call it disease, but some people will call it as urgency. They say this is important. Even late Yaser Arafat always, when he wanted to, he was disappointed every time he wanted to get into a peace agreement, but because of Hamas refusal and rejection. I say that in this atmosphere,
in this current political atmosphere in Palestine, it's existing the same way in all countries around the world. All people around the world do not have the necessary objectivity that enables each party to express and to have this agreement with the other party according to rules without considering the weakness of the other as a strength for me, because it was proven and it's now evident that the weakness that we saw in one of the parties of the Palestinian situation is weakening all Palestinian parties, and now the war that's being waged by Israel in Gaza is accompanied by resistance in the West Bank and fighting against occupation. But at the same time, this results in more pressure on the West Bank, and now they want to reach the result that they want, which is diminishing the dream of the Palestinian state by a wide-scale annexation of the West Bank. For this reason, what needs to be done now, I'm not talking about a technocratic government. I am talking about a national government, including all Palestinian people and categories in the country and abroad, in order to form a national government who is capable to gather everyone around it, supported by Fatah, Hamas, and all the political powers. This should be recognized by Washington and the international scale, unless there is what is right now being talked about. Unless we have an actual national reformation that we initiate, we will have an even worse disaster than we have right now. I don't want to spread the pessimism and diminish what optimism we have, but we have been through this many times before, and this is the worst of these experiences, and it's more grave if we do not learn that it's necessary to try to take our politics from the partisan fight and the ideologies that replace the national reality that we are looking for, and that everyone knows is the solution based on the two-state solution. Unless we take steps that will not cost much, and unless we show the world our true colors, what we are indeed, and we don't extend our hand to the world, unless we do that, we will lose this opportunity, and we don't know when we will have another opportunity. This could be a cliche, but we need political leaders who have the courage of the Palestinian child who was facing an Israeli tank with a rock. Some leaders are giving more priority to their ideologies right now. In brief, we have some short time. What is the practical perspective of the state that can lead to establishing a Palestinian state? Can we really have a bridge built between the West Bank and Gaza and maybe circumvent around the Israeli settlements? What is the perspective? We have planned tons of projects that cover all these aspects, and some of these projects were very deeply detailed, whether in terms of the geography or the security cooperation, economic cooperation, for even the airspace and air traffic and everything. Also security, and how can security be guaranteed in a manner that serves the interest of both parties? We are not starting from scratch. And for example, I participated in creating a very detailed roadmap for the two-state solution in Geneva in 2002 or 2003, and even recently. Olmert and Nasser al-Qudwa had a project of a similar nature. So we do not need visions or documents or perspectives and solutions on or things that can help us re-engineer a form of these two bodies coexisting, an independent Palestinian state with that real independence in addition to the state of Israel. This is not what we are lacking. What we are lacking is an actual political will that takes us to that goal. Dr. Dalal, briefly, how can the Israeli rejection and Israeli attempts be mitigated, their attempts to undermine the Palestinian state? They say there is a lack of conversation with those who want peace in Israel. We are always addressing the Israeli government, but as Mr. Yaser Abdrabbou said, there is some partnership between Israelis and Palestinians in a peace project. Maybe this doesn't receive the necessary support. Is there any hope or any use of communication and dialogue with those who want the two-state solution in Israel? And should we always be afraid of blame and the accusation of normalization as Palestinians addressing or communicating with Israelis, especially that after October 7th, there's been trauma among Israelis. The society is going towards the radical right, but I want to remind in 2 points. In the peaceful ways to resolve conflicts, negotiations is a tool, it's not the purpose. And over the past 30 years, unintentionally maybe, policymakers have been addressing negotiations as an objective. It's not our objective to have Israelis and Palestinians around the negotiation table. It's a tool that will take us to a pragmatic solution that's satisfactory to all parties. Also, another point, as was said in the previous panel discussion, all this instability and also in the title of this conference about the flux, this is not just because of the Iranian monster. Also, there is an illegitimate Israeli occupation that is diminishing the hopes of Palestinians, and also it threatens more expansion. We are living a daily de facto. There is always a clear annexation plans, and Israeli settlement is there already everywhere. There are armed settlers that threaten Palestinians. If I want to go from Ramallah to Jericho, which is only 30 minutes away, there are a lot of checkpoints. I would be inspected, searched, and my children would have weapons pointed at them in my car. All this is under the military occupation, which comes alongside the settlement occupation. So, is there some part that we can have a dialogue with in Israel? Of course, there are. Of course, there are parties. I am a believer that people who have principles and who have willpower, if we believe in the peaceful tools, we can create change. We have great opportunity today. It's a historical opportunity that the Arab world is having right now, especially under Trump, because he's a pragmatic person. Our Arab media hosts tons of Israeli analysts who speak Arabic and also who influence a certain segment. How many Israeli channels host Palestinian or Arab analysts who might convince the viewers as well? Have we not tried this way, or is it useless to try it because we always see people being accused of normalization, which prevents this kind of dialogue, except among officials? We are beyond this stage right now, honestly. And from the middle of the 1970s, we've been in conversations, dialogues, meetings. Is that on an official level, or is on the official level, on the sectoral level, on the intellectual level, on the women activists and civil community? It's on all level. It's an ongoing, actively ongoing process, and it doesn't require to be formed right now from scratch. We're not. Of course, it has an impact, but as a result, it's a pressure force. It's not a decision-making force. You can use the civil society or involve the civil society in order to form some pressure. However, the political power is the one that can mitigate this rule or undermine this effort. This accusation is no more important. No one is there to accuse us because the national and political awareness among Palestinians has long gone beyond this, and we don't want to open this can of worms, so to speak, because it's no more. It doesn't have any point anymore. Before we take questions, in case everything was adverse and the willpower is weak, and some could say that Israelis believe they won't need to have any Palestinian state. Let's go back to having the West Bank with Jordan and Gaza to Egypt as it was before 1948. So, do you think that the Palestinian issue is going in that direction to be finally settled in that way in the negative scenario? I believe that Israel is going in the one-state solution. It's the apartheid state, and they are creating the reality of the one-state solution. And speaking of Jordan and Egypt, and from the national security perspective for Jordan and for Egypt, and even for Palestinian, and none of these parties will accept that. Also, for the sake of the regional security, no one in the region will accept that. It's important to have the two-state solution. This year, Israel had committed crimes that were documented, and it's an unprecedented level of crimes and atrocities that were committed by Israel. It's important that Israel doesn't always emerge without punishment. I am talking about coercive diplomacy. This can be through free agreements or any options that will impose international legitimacy on Israel, because we are living in the world of 2024. So, do you think that there are ways to block Israel from some trade routes or trade agreements? We're not only talking about the Palestinians, they are doing the same with Lebanese and Jordanian and other people. And Netanyahu is always using the Machiavelli's thinking. He is always buying more time in order to annex the remaining land. Your question about the win-win situation, prosperity, and other aspects, I still believe there is opportunity, but the lesson that needs to be learned by everyone is that the solution is not purely security or military or purely economy without a parallel political track. Mr. Yasser, let's conclude with you. I have two questions. Is the current attempt is to end the Palestinian issue by diminishing the Palestinian state project. Is it a one apartheid state, or would it be annexed to neighboring countries? What is the worst case scenario that Israel is seeking to implement now? Right now, the current reality. How do you see the region in 10 years from the Israeli perspective? Through the mass migration and displacement of Palestinians from wide parts of Gaza. Even until last night, they are willing to evacuate the northern parts of Gaza and maybe the remainder of Gaza so that Palestinians stay on a very narrow strip on the coast. So they will be eroding the lands gradually. It's not 20 or 30 years. It could be 20 or 30 days. I am talking about a very narrow coastal strip consisting of tents or bubbles, as they call them. And this is an existing project. It's not something that we are just talking about. It's being implementing, and they are getting closer every day. The same is happening in the West Bank. Yes, in the West Bank, they want to practically diminish any possibilities or opportunities to create a Palestinian state, so that no Israeli party or international entity or Palestinian party cannot change the reality in the future. And they're hoping that this could be followed by more pressure on the Palestinian areas, isolating them and pressuring them with living conditions that lead to slow migration from these areas. The right-wing Israeli project, which was joined by parties from the left and the center amid the chaos that happened after October 7th. This is seeking to get rid of any presence of Palestinians on a national land that could be a basis for a Palestinian independent Palestinian state. Thank you so much.
I have two questions. I think we have 3 or 4 minutes remaining. So I'll take a couple of questions. We'll start with Shafi Ad-Damr. Shafi Ad-Damr. Yeah, good afternoon. I think the opportunity at the moment at the international level. Oh, now I can find you. Yeah. Particularly after having a new administration in the U.S. that is away from any pressures, internal pressures, or maybe from the IPAC or other organizations supporting or backing up Israel in there. So we have an American president that's already aware of the situation, regardless of the peace processes before. We're talking about someone who knows. We don't want more time to explain. And Hamas on the military level, they already finished. So the diplomacy in Saudi Arabia, they started a few months ago. So all these factors will make us optimistic. So a question, if the chance or the opportunity comes again, maybe next year or later, some changes in the Israeli government, what is the situation of the Palestinians towards this? Final question for Mr. Abdulaziz Al-Joushan. Al-Ghashan. Sorry, because it was written in English letters, so I couldn't read properly. I want to ask about the concept of the state solution, one-state solution, or the one-state solution, as I said. Is this idea or proposal eligible or have eligibility among the Palestinians or the Palestinian community? Because some people will say, okay, we'll talk about theories from outside. We say this is the best solution or that. But I'm talking about about the popularity of this idea among the Palestinian people. And the other point is, what's your point of view on the consequences of lack of peace in the West Bank, on Jordan? The first question about the Palestinian popularity of the Palestinian people, for example, in the streets, would say the Kurds in Iraq, they live in a semi-state. They don't have sovereignty when they wanted. I think that the point that was proposed by the first. We're going to go back to this one for Trump later. But we say that when we think of a civilized way and also emotional, and as you said, people from outside will talk about a one-state solution. It's a very civilized scenario, but I live there. I live in this reality. They never have a look at me at a citizen with equal rights. Even the Israeli citizens that are not Jews, they don't have the rights, the full rights like the Israeli Jewish. So if from realpolitik, it's impossible to imagine that they will deal us as a citizen with equal rights. He said, what will happen if the things are okay? Will the Palestinian people just accept this? Yeah, if we just stop logic and thought and we will talk about only emotion or feelings, we say yes. Some say that Trump learned it from the lessons, and there are some possibilities that Netanyahu, because of the investigation, will go and someone else will replace him and maybe accept that. It's, in my opinion, let's say that I have an initial belief, and I don't even have credibility for this belief for myself. But I believe that Trump, in his second term in the White House, maybe learned a lot from the mistakes that he has done during his first administration. The the Israeli side is being proactive and try to the immersive policy, or they wanted to drag the new administration in the U.S. into policies that practically mean the full destruction of the two-state solution, elimination of this possibility, permanent occupation of Gaza Strip, and also to accept the settlement program to hinder the geographic unity. Trump has good relations with the Arab countries, with Saudi Arabia and other countries. This is the point that I want to add. I believe that the role played by the KSA and also the UAE and Egypt and Jordan, with the new administration, this role, it's not a tertiary, it's not secondary, it's a crucial, and I believe in that Saudi Arabia and the other countries can make difference in terms of direct or actual impact on how to draw the final settlement and solution for the region, starting from the end and termination of the war against Palestine and Lebanon. And the Palestinian leadership should help these countries. Yeah, they should level up to the situation. And I always, because I always reiterate, we are in a real need to national reform, political reform, internal reform. The status that we have reached, we can see we know from our experience with Israel, my parents, my grandparents, we know this by heart, but it's much better to ignite a candle than cursing darkness. And having the candle now and lighting the candle now is the change of this situation and the political regime in Palestine, as we said. Now, this is an indicator that our time is over. I would like to thank my colleagues, Mr. Yaser Abdrabbou, the former General Secretary of the PLO, and Dr. Dalal Iriqat, the Associate Professor of Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution in the American University in Palestine. Thank you very much for your time.